Right now, as you're listening to this, there's something you should be doing instead. There's a project you've been putting off, a conversation you've been avoiding, a decision you've been delaying, a goal you've been pushing to next week, next month, next year, and while you tell yourself you'll get to it later, that later is stealing your life. Here's the brutal truth that nobody wants to hear. Every single day you wait, every single moment you delay, you're not just postponing action. You're compounding failure. You're not just missing opportunities. You're training your brain to be weak. You're not just procrastinating. You're programming yourself for mediocrity. The most successful people in the world share one trait above all others. It's not talent. It's not luck. It's not connections. It's their ability to act now while everyone else is planning, preparing, and procrastinating. They're executing. While others are waiting for the perfect moment, they're creating it. This isn't another motivation video that will make you feel good for 5 minutes before you go back to your old patterns. This is a complete system for destroying delay and building unstoppable momentum. By the time you finish this, you'll never look at procrastination the same way again. You'll understand why waiting is the enemy of everything you want. And you'll have the exact tools to take massive action starting today. But I'm warning you now. This requires you to face some uncomfortable truths about yourself. Because the reason you're not where you want to be isn't because you don't know what to do. It's because you're not doing what you know. Chapter 1. The Procrastination Epidemic Destroying Your Life. Let me paint you a picture of what procrastination really costs you. Most people think delaying action is harmless. They think it's just about missing a few deadlines or starting projects a little late. But procrastination isn't just stealing your time. It's stealing your identity, your confidence, and your entire future. Every time you say, "I'll do it tomorrow," you're making a choice. You're choosing to be the type of person who delays instead of the type who delivers. You're choosing weakness over strength. You're choosing comfort over growth. And here's what's terrifying. Every choice to procrastinate makes the next choice to procrastinate easier. Think about the last major goal you set for yourself. Maybe it was starting a business, getting in shape, learning a new skill, or finally having that difficult conversation. Now, think about how many times you've told yourself you'd start tomorrow. How many tomorrows have come and gone? How many times have you reset your start date? This is what I call the tomorrow trap. And it's destroying millions of lives. The tomorrow trap works like this. You convince yourself that future you will be more motivated, more prepared, more ready than current you. You tell yourself that tomorrow you'll have more energy, more time, more clarity. But here's the psychological truth that will change everything for you. Tomorrow you will be exactly the same person as today, you facing exactly the same resistance with exactly the same excuses. The only difference is that tomorrow you will have one more day of evidence that you're someone who doesn't follow through. One more day of proof that you can't trust yourself. One more day of compound procrastination weighing you down. Scientists have studied the procrastination brain, and what they've found is terrifying. When you consistently delay action, you literally rewire your neural pathways to default to avoidance. Your brain starts seeing delay as the normal response to challenges. You become neurologically programmed for procrastination. But it gets worse. Procrastination doesn't just affect your productivity, it destroys your self-concept. Every time you fail to do what you said you do, you lose a little bit of self-respect. Every broken promise to yourself chips away at your confidence. Every delayed action reinforces the belief that you're not capable of change. This is why some people seem stuck in the same patterns for years, even decades. They're not lazy. They're not stupid. They're not unmotivated. They're trapped in a neurological loop where procrastination has become their default setting. Most people don't realize they're in this trap until it's almost too late. They wake up at 40, 50, 60 years old and realize they've been planning the same dreams for decades without ever acting on them. They've been preparing to live instead of actually living. The cost isn't just personal, It's professional and financial, too. Studies show that chronic procrastinators earn significantly less money over their lifetime. They miss promotions, avoid challenging opportunities, and never build the momentum necessary for major success. While others are taking action and getting results, procrastinators are still planning. But here's what's even more devastating. Procrastination is contagious. When you model delay and avoidance, you're teaching everyone around you that this is normal. Your children learn that big dreams are things you talk about, not things you do. Your spouse learns that your word doesn't mean much. Your team learns that urgency isn't really urgent. The truth is, in a world where everyone is procrastinating, the person who acts immediately has an almost unfair advantage. While others are thinking about starting, you're already making progress. While they're preparing, you're already learning through doing. While they're waiting for motivation, you're building momentum through action. Chapter 2. The Psychology of Later and Why Your Brain Fights Action. Your brain is not designed for the modern world. It's designed for survival in an environment where immediate threats required immediate responses and everything else could wait. This ancient programming is exactly what's sabotaging your success today. When you think about taking action on something important but not urgent, your brain categorizes it as non-essential for survival. It literally doesn't understand why you would stress yourself with challenges when you could just stay comfortable. This is why picking up your phone feels easier than picking up that project. This is why scrolling social media feels natural while working on your goals feels like fighting against yourself. But here's what's fascinating about human psychology. Your brain will do almost anything to avoid uncertainty and discomfort. And every important action you need to take comes with uncertainty. Starting a business means uncertain income. Having difficult conversations means uncertain outcomes. Learning new skills means uncertain competence. So your brain offers you a seemingly perfect solution. Delay. Delay gives you the illusion of control. When you say, "I'll start Monday," you feel like you've made a decision without actually facing any risk. When you say, "I'll do it after I research more," you feel productive without actually producing anything. Your brain loves this because it gets to feel accomplished without experiencing any of the discomfort that comes with real action. This is what psychologists call the planning fallacy. Your brain overestimates how much you can get done in the future while underestimating how much resistance you'll face. It assumes that future you will have unlimited time, energy and motivation. It assumes that all the obstacles that stop you today somehow won't exist tomorrow. But there's an even deeper psychological trap at play here. Most people procrastinate because they're afraid of being judged. They're terrified that if they try and fail, they'll be exposed as inadequate. So, they never try. They preserve their self-image by never putting it at risk. This is why perfectionism and procrastination are best friends. Perfectionism tells you that you need to wait until you can do something perfectly. Procrastination ensures you never have to face the reality that your first attempt might be imperfect. Together they keep you safe, comfortable, and completely stuck. Your brain also has something called the present bias, which means it values immediate rewards far more than future rewards. Even when you intellectually know that taking action now will benefit you enormously later. Your emotional brain doesn't care about later. It only cares about now and right now. Avoiding discomfort feels better than embracing it. This is why motivation fails. Motivation is trying to convince your emotional brain to care about future rewards. But emotions don't work that way. Your emotional brain doesn't care that working out will make you healthier in 6 months. It only knows that working out right now is uncomfortable. Here's another psychological trap that keeps people stuck. When you procrastinate, you often engage in what psychologists call moral licensing. You do small, easy tasks that make you feel productive, which then gives you permission to avoid the big important tasks. You clean your desk instead of writing your business plan. You organize your files instead of making sales calls. You feel busy, but you're busy avoiding the work that actually matters. Your brain is also programmed to seek the path of least resistance. This is why you'll spend hours watching videos about productivity instead of actually being productive. Learning about action feels like action, but it's not. Your brain gets the satisfaction of feeling like you're moving forward without any of the discomfort of actual forward movement. But perhaps the most destructive psychological pattern is what I call someday syndrome. This is when your brain convinces you that conditions will be better in the future. Someday you'll have more time. Someday you'll be more prepared. Someday the circumstances will be perfect. But here's the truth about someday. It never comes. Perfect conditions don't exist. The only condition that matters is your decision to act despite imperfect conditions. The people who break free from these psychological traps understand something crucial about human nature. You don't wait until you feel like taking action. You take action until you feel like taking more action. Action creates emotion, not the other way around. When you force yourself to start, even when you don't want to, you begin to generate the very feelings that make continuation easier. Chapter 3. The compound cost of every delayed decision. Most people think about procrastination like a simple delay. They think missing today's workout just means missing today's workout. They think postponing that important conversation just means having it later. But this is completely wrong. Every delay has a compound cost that grows exponentially over time. When you delay taking action on something important, you're not just postponing the benefit, you're compounding the damage. Every day you don't work out, you're not just missing the immediate health benefit. You're allowing your fitness to decline, your energy to drop, and your confidence to erode. Every day you avoid that difficult conversation, the problem gets bigger, the relationship gets more strained, and the eventual confrontation becomes more difficult. This is the hidden mathematics of procrastination. The cost isn't linear, it's exponential. Miss one day of progress and you've lost one day. Miss a week and you've lost more than a week because you've also lost momentum, confidence, and the compounding benefits of consistent action. Let me show you how this works in practice. Imagine you want to start a side business. On day 1, starting feels overwhelming but possible. You need to research your market, create a basic product, and find your first customers. But you decide to start tomorrow. After a week of delays, starting feels slightly harder because now you're questioning your initial idea. Maybe the market has changed. Maybe someone else had the same idea. You need to do more research before you start. After a month of delays, starting feels significantly harder because you've lost confidence in your ability to follow through. You've proven to yourself that you don't do what you say you'll do. Plus, you now feel behind before you've even started. After 3 months of delays, starting feels almost impossible. The initial excitement is completely gone. The idea that felt fresh and promising now feels stale and questionable. You've accumulated so much shame around not starting that the thought of beginning brings up feelings of failure before you've even tried. This is compound procrastination in action. Each day of delay doesn't just cost you that day. It makes every future day harder. It's like interest on debt, except instead of owing money, you owe yourself action, confidence, and self-respect. But the compound cost goes beyond just the specific thing you're avoiding. Procrastination in one area of your life bleeds into every other area. When you prove to yourself that you can't be trusted to follow through in your career, you start doubting your ability to follow through in your relationships, your health, your personal goals. This is why some people seem to procrastinate on everything while others seem to execute on everything. It's not about intelligence or talent. It's about the compound effect of their daily choices. Every action you take builds evidence that you're someone who acts. Every delay builds evidence that you're someone who doesn't. The compound cost also applies to opportunities. Every day you delay starting something important, you're missing opportunities that would only be available to someone who's already started. The connections you could have made, the skills you could have developed, the momentum you could have built, the confidence you could have earned. Think about someone who's been saying they want to start a YouTube channel for 2 years versus someone who started 2 years ago despite not feeling ready. The person who started isn't just 2 years ahead in terms of time. They're exponentially ahead in terms of experience, audience, income, potential, and opportunities. They've learned lessons that can only be learned through doing. They've built relationships that can only be built through action. They've developed skills that can only be developed through practice. This is why waiting for the perfect moment is so devastating. While you're waiting, everyone else who's willing to start imperfectly is building an insurmountable lead. They're not just getting ahead. They're compounding their advantages while you're compounding your delays. The most successful entrepreneurs don't wait until their product is perfect. They launch and improve. The most successful athletes don't wait until they feel motivated. They train and build motivation through training. The most successful people in any field understand that starting imperfectly beats not starting perfectly. But here's what's even more powerful to understand about compound costs. Just like delayed action compounds negatively, immediate action compounds positively. Every time you choose to act instead of delay, you're not just getting today's benefit. You're building momentum that makes tomorrow's action easier. When you work out today, you don't just get today's fitness benefit. You get the energy boost that makes you more productive. You get the confidence boost that makes you more likely to take other positive actions. You get the identity shift that makes you see yourself as someone who follows through. This is why small actions often lead to massive changes. It's not because the actions themselves are so significant. It's because each action builds evidence for a new identity. And your identity determines every future choice you make. Chapter 4. The Now System for Instant Action. Everything changes the moment you understand this principle. You don't need to feel ready to start. You just need to start to become ready. The Now System is built on this truth. It's a framework that bypasses your brain's resistance and creates automatic action. No stands for notice, obliterate, and win. Notice the resistance, obliterate the delay, and win through immediate action. This isn't about motivation or willpower. This is about creating a systematic response to the urge to procrastinate. The first step is notice. Most people don't even realize when they're procrastinating because their brain offers them what feels like legitimate excuses. I need to research more. I should wait until I have more time. I'll be more motivated tomorrow. These sound reasonable, but they're all forms of avoidance. The notice phase requires you to develop what I call procrastination awareness. This means catching yourself in the moment when you're about to delay action. The key is to identify the physical sensations that accompany the urge to procrastinate. Most people feel a subtle anxiety, a heaviness in their chest, or a sudden urge to do something else. Learn to recognize these signals as your procrastination alarm going off. When you notice these sensations, you've caught your brain trying to protect you from discomfort. This is actually good news because it means you're about to do something that matters. Your brain only creates resistance around things that could change your life. It doesn't resist you scrolling social media because that keeps you safe and stuck. The second step is obliterate. This means immediately destroying every excuse your brain offers you. Your brain will flood you with reasons why you should wait. You need to have responses ready for every common excuse. I don't have enough time. Response. I have enough time to start. I'm not prepared enough. Response. I'll prepare through doing. I don't feel motivated. Response. I create motivation through action. I should do it when I can do it properly. Response. Done imperfectly is better than perfect. Never. The key is to not negotiate with your brain. Don't try to convince yourself that you should take action. Your emotional brain doesn't care about logic. Instead, simply acknowledge the resistance and act anyway. Think of it like walking through a spiderweb. You don't stop to analyze the web. You just brush it off and keep moving. The obliterate phase also involves removing what I call action friction. This means eliminating any steps between the decision to act and the action itself. If you want to work out, have your workout clothes laid out. If you want to write, have your computer open to a blank document. If you want to make sales calls, have your contact list ready and your phone in your hand. Most people fail not because they can't do the work, but because they create too many micro decisions between thinking about the work and doing the work. Every micro decision is an opportunity for your brain to talk you out of acting. Eliminate the micro decisions and action becomes automatic. The third step is win. This means taking the smallest possible action immediately. Not tomorrow. Not in 5 minutes, not after you finish this other thing. Right now. The goal isn't to complete the entire project. The goal is to prove to yourself that you're someone who acts when you say you will. This could mean writing 1 sentence, doing 1 push-up, making 1 phone call, or sending 1 email. The size of the action doesn't matter. What matters is the speed of the action. The faster you move from decision to action, the less time your brain has to create resistance. Here's why this works so powerfully. Every time you follow through on immediate action, you strengthen what psychologists call your action pathway. You literally rewire your brain to default to action instead of delay. Your brain starts to see you as someone who does what they say they'll do. But here's the secret that makes this system incredibly powerful. Often starting is the hardest part. Once you take that first small action, momentum carries you forward. You intended to write 1 sentence, but you end up writing a paragraph. You plan to do 1 push-up, but you end up doing 10. The action itself creates the energy for more action. This is called the Zijek effect. Your brain has a natural tendency to want to complete things it has started by starting immediately, even in the smallest way. You're engaging this psychological tendency. Your brain starts pushing you to continue instead of resisting the start. The now system also works because it transforms your relationship with discomfort. Instead of seeing the discomfort of starting as a reason to wait, you start seeing it as confirmation that you're about to do something important. The resistance becomes your signal to act, not your signal to delay. Most people spend more energy avoiding work than it would take to actually do the work. They spend hours researching productivity techniques, organizing their space, and planning their approach. Meanwhile, someone using the Now system has already started and is building real momentum. Chapter 5. Breaking the preparation trap that keeps you stuck. There's a seductive trap that catches almost everyone who's trying to achieve something significant. It disguises itself as productivity. It feels responsible and intelligent. It appears to be progress, but it's actually one of the most sophisticated forms of procrastination ever created. I call it the preparation trap. The preparation trap works like this. Instead of taking action, you convince yourself that you need to prepare more first. You need to read more books, watch more tutorials, take more courses, do more research, create more detailed plans. You tell yourself that preparation is work, that learning is progress, that planning is action. But none of this is true. Preparation without action is just sophisticated procrastination. It's your brain's way of keeping you busy while avoiding the risk that comes with real action. Your brain loves preparation because it feels like progress without any of the vulnerability that comes with actually testing your ideas in the real world. Here's how you know you're trapped in preparation. You keep consuming information about your goal instead of working toward your goal. You've read dozens of books about starting a business but haven't started a business. You've watched hundreds of hours of fitness videos but haven't consistently worked out. You've researched every possible approach to your problem but haven't implemented any approach. The preparation trap is particularly dangerous because it feels so reasonable. Society has programmed us to believe that preparation prevents poor performance. We're taught to study hard, plan carefully, and think things through. But here's what nobody tells you. For most goals, preparation beyond a basic level actually decreases your chances of success. Why? Because excessive preparation creates what psychologists call analysis paralysis. The more you research, the more options you discover. The more options you have, the harder it becomes to choose. The harder it becomes to choose, the more likely you are to delay choosing. And while you're stuck in analysis, people who started with less preparation are already getting results and learning through experience. Real preparation happens through action, not before action. You don't learn to drive by reading driving manuals. You learn to drive by driving. You don't learn to swim by studying swimming techniques. You learn to swim by getting in the water. You don't learn to build a successful business by reading business books. You learn by starting a business and figuring it out as you go. Here's the brutal truth about preparation. It has diminishing returns that approach zero. The first hour of research might give you 80% of what you need to know. The second hour might give you another 10%. The 10th hour might give you 1%. But your brain will convince you that you need that extra 1% before you can start. Meanwhile, someone who started after the first hour of research is already 10 hours ahead of you in real-world experience. They've learned things that can't be learned through preparation. They've made mistakes that can't be anticipated through planning. They've built momentum that can't be created through thinking. The most successful people in any field are not the most prepared. They're the most willing to start before they feel ready. They understand that competence comes from action, not preparation. They know that the market will teach them faster than any book. They realize that customers will guide them better than any business plan. This doesn't mean preparation is useless. Basic preparation is essential. You need to understand the fundamentals. You need a general direction. You need to know enough to take the first step safely. But the key word is basic. Once you have enough knowledge to start, any additional preparation is just fear disguised as diligence. Here's how to know when you've prepared enough. When you understand the basic requirements and have a clear first action you can take today. If you want to start a podcast, you need to understand how to record audio and where to host it. That's it. You don't need to study marketing strategies for 6 months. If you want to start working out, you need to know how to do basic exercises safely. You don't need to research every possible workout program for weeks. The preparation trap is also dangerous because it creates what I call false progress syndrome. When you spend a day researching, you feel like you've made progress toward your goal. Your brain releases the same satisfaction chemicals as if you'd actually taken action. But research isn't progress. Learning isn't achieving. Planning isn't doing. This false sense of progress actually reduces your motivation to take real action. If you already feel like you've made progress through preparation, your brain has less drive to push you toward actual progress through action. It's like eating a small snack before a meal. You feel less hungry for the main course. Breaking free from the preparation trap requires you to embrace what I call intelligent ignorance. This means deliberately choosing to remain ignorant about certain details until you actually need to know them. It means starting before you feel ready and learning what you need to know when you need to know it. Intelligent ignorance is not about being reckless. It's about understanding that most information is only valuable in context, and context comes from action. You can read about sales techniques for months, but until you're actually trying to sell something to real customers, the information remains abstract. The moment you start selling, the same information becomes immediately practical and useful. The antidote to the preparation trap is what I call action-based learning. Instead of learning then doing, you do while learning. You start with minimal preparation, take action, encounter real problems, learn specific solutions, apply them immediately and repeat. This creates a feedback loop where learning and doing happen simultaneously. Action-based learning is exponentially faster than preparation-based learning because it's focused and relevant. When you're actually building a business, you only research the specific problems you're currently facing. When you're actually trying to lose weight, you only learn about the obstacles you're actually encountering. This targeted learning is incredibly efficient because it's immediately applicable. Chapter 6. Destroying the distraction addiction that steals your focus. Here's a truth that will make you uncomfortable. You are addicted to distraction. Your brain craves the constant stimulation of notifications, social media, entertainment, and busy work. This addiction is not accidental. It's been engineered by billion-dollar companies that profit from your scattered attention, and it's destroying your ability to take sustained action on anything meaningful. Most people think distraction is harmless. They think checking their phone real quick or browsing social media for a few minutes is just a small break. But these aren't breaks. They're mental hijackings. Every time you give into distraction, you're training your brain to seek the path of least resistance. You're rewiring your neural pathways to default, to entertainment instead of effort. The average person checks their phone 96 times per day. That's once every 10 minutes during waking hours. Each check creates what neuroscientists call a dopamine hit, a small burst of pleasure that your brain quickly craves again. This creates an addiction cycle identical to gambling or drug addiction. Your brain becomes dependent on the constant novelty and stimulation, making focused work feel boring and unbearable by comparison. But here's what's truly devastating about distraction addiction. It doesn't just steal your time. It steals your ability to think deeply. Real progress on important goals requires what psychologists call deep work. Sustained periods of focused attention on cognitively demanding tasks. But deep work is exactly what distraction addiction destroys. When you constantly switch between tasks, your brain never fully engages with any single task. You exist in a state of continuous partial attention where you're always slightly distracted, always slightly unfocused, always operating at a fraction of your mental capacity. This is why you can work for hours and feel like you've accomplished nothing meaningful. The cost of this scattered attention goes far beyond productivity. When you can't focus deeply, you can't think deeply. When you can't think deeply, you can't solve complex problems, create original ideas, or develop genuine expertise. You become intellectually shallow, dependent on other people's thinking instead of developing your own. This is why so many people feel stuck in their careers and personal lives. They're not lazy or incapable. They're just operating with a fractured attention span that makes meaningful progress impossible. They start projects but never finish them because their brain abandons anything that doesn't provide instant gratification. Breaking free from distraction addiction requires you to understand how your environment shapes your behavior. Your phone sitting within arm's reach isn't neutral. It's actively pulling your attention away from whatever you're trying to focus on. Your computer with social media tabs open isn't just convenient. It's sabotaging your ability to concentrate. The solution isn't willpower. It's environmental design. You need to create what I call a focus fortress. An environment that makes distraction difficult and focused work easy. This means physically removing distraction triggers from your workspace. Put your phone in another room. Close unnecessary browser tabs. Use website blockers during focused work sessions. But environmental design is only the first step. You also need to retrain your brain to crave focus instead of distraction. This happens through what neuroscientists call deliberate boredom. Instead of immediately reaching for stimulation when you feel bored or uncomfortable, you learn to sit with those feelings. Most people are terrified of boredom. The moment they feel understimulated, they grab their phone or find some other form of entertainment. But boredom is not the enemy. It's the gateway to deep thinking. When you allow yourself to be bored, your brain starts generating its own stimulation through creative thinking, problem solving, and reflection. This is why your best ideas often come in the shower, during walks, or right before you fall asleep. These are moments when your brain isn't being bombarded with external stimulation, so it has space to make new connections and generate insights. To build focus strength, start with what I call focus sprints. Set a timer for 25 minutes and work on one task with complete attention. No phone, no internet, no distractions. When thoughts about other things arise, simply acknowledge them and return to your task. When the timer ends, take a 5-minute break, then repeat. This isn't just a productivity technique. It's attention training. Each time you resist the urge to check your phone or switch tasks, you're strengthening your focus muscle. Each time you bring your attention back to your work after it wanders, you're building the neural pathways that support sustained concentration. The goal isn't to eliminate all distractions forever. The goal is to develop the ability to focus intensely when you choose to. This means being intentional about when you consume entertainment, check social media, or engage with technology. Instead of being constantly available to every distraction, you become selective about what gets your attention and when. Here's what happens when you develop genuine focus ability. Work that used to take you all day gets done in a few hours. Problems that seemed impossible become manageable when you can think about them deeply and continuously. Projects that you've been procrastinating on suddenly become engaging because you can sustain attention long enough to make real progress. But perhaps most importantly, when you control your attention, you control your life. Instead of being pulled in every direction by whatever demands your attention loudest, you become intentional about where you direct your mental energy. You stop being reactive and start being purposeful. The modern world is designed to fracture your attention and keep you in a state of constant distraction. The companies behind social media, news websites, and entertainment platforms have teams of neuroscientists and behavioral psychologists working to make their products as addictive as possible. They're literally hijacking your brain's reward systems to keep you engaged with their content instead of engaged with your goals. Fighting this requires conscious rebellion against the attention economy. You need to recognize that your focus is your most valuable asset and there are powerful forces trying to steal it from you. Protecting your attention becomes a matter of protecting your potential. Chapter 7. The Momentum Effect in Building Unstoppable Action Chains. There's a force in physics called inertia. Objects at rest tend to stay at rest. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. This same principle applies to human behavior with even greater power. People who are procrastinating tend to keep procrastinating. People who are taking action tend to keep taking action. The difference between success and failure often comes down to which type of inertia you create in your life. Most people underestimate the power of momentum because they think about success in terms of individual actions instead of action patterns. They think that one workout, one day of productivity or one moment of discipline is just one isolated event. But every action you take creates psychological momentum that makes the next action easier or harder. When you take positive action, especially when you don't feel like it, you create what psychologists call self-efficacy. This is your belief in your ability to execute actions necessary to achieve your goals. Each successful action increases your self-efficacy, which increases your motivation to take more action, which creates more success, which builds more confidence. This is the momentum effect in action. But momentum works in both directions. Every time you choose comfort over challenge, every time you delay important action, every time you break a commitment to yourself, you create negative momentum. You build evidence that you're someone who doesn't follow through, which makes future action feel more difficult and less likely. This is why some people seem to effortlessly maintain healthy habits while others struggle with the same actions for years. It's not about different genetics or more willpower. It's about different momentum patterns. The people who maintain healthy habits have built positive momentum that makes healthy choices feel natural. The people who struggle are fighting against negative momentum that makes every healthy choice feel like an uphill battle. Understanding momentum changes everything about how you approach behavior change. Instead of trying to transform your entire life overnight, you focus on creating small wins that build positive momentum. Instead of setting massive goals that feel overwhelming, you design action chains that make success almost inevitable. An action chain is a sequence of small actions, each one designed to make the next action easier. For example, if you want to work out consistently, your action chain might look like this. Put workout clothes next to your bed. Put them on immediately when you wake up. Walk to your workout area. Do one push-up. Then continue with your full workout. Each link in the chain reduces friction for the next link. Most people fail at building new habits because they try to jump directly to the end result without building the momentum chain that makes the result inevitable. They want to immediately work out for an hour when they haven't exercised in months. They want to immediately write for 2 hours when they haven't written consistently ever. They're trying to create motion without building momentum. The secret to unstoppable momentum is what I call the 2-minute rule. Whatever action you want to build momentum around, design a version that takes less than 2 minutes. Want to start writing? Commit to writing 1 sentence. Want to start exercising? Commit to putting on your workout clothes. Want to start reading more? Commit to reading 1 page. The goal of the 2-minute rule isn't to complete your entire goal in 2 minutes. The goal is to start building the neural pathway and identity associated with that action. When you consistently write 1 sentence, you start seeing yourself as a writer. When you consistently put on workout clothes, you start seeing yourself as someone who exercises. Identity momentum is more powerful than action momentum. But here's where most people make a critical mistake with momentum. They break their chains over minor setbacks. They miss 1 workout and decide they've ruined their fitness momentum. They have 1 unproductive day and conclude they're not disciplined. They let 1 small break become a complete stop. Momentum isn't about perfection. It's about persistence. A chain with a few broken links is still infinitely stronger than no chain at all. When you miss a day, the key is to restart immediately, not to wait for the perfect time to begin again. The longer you wait after a setback, the more momentum you lose and the harder it becomes to restart. This is why successful people have what I call rapid recovery protocols. When they break a positive habit, they don't waste time feeling guilty or making excuses. They immediately focus on the very next opportunity to rebuild momentum. They understand that the gap between breaking a habit and restarting it determines whether it becomes a temporary setback or a permanent regression. To build unstoppable momentum, you need to design your life around action chains rather than isolated actions. Instead of thinking I need to exercise today, you think I need to continue my exercise momentum. Instead of I should work on my project, you think I should strengthen my project momentum. This momentum mindset makes you incredibly resilient because you're not depending on motivation or perfect conditions. You're depending on the psychological force that builds from consistent action. Even when you don't feel like taking action, the momentum you've built makes action feel more natural than inaction. Here's how to identify if you have positive or negative momentum in any area of your life. Pay attention to how you feel when you think about taking action. If the thought of working out, working on your business, or tackling your important projects feels heavy and difficult, you have negative momentum. If these thoughts feel neutral or even energizing, you have positive momentum. Negative momentum can be reversed, but it requires acknowledging that you're fighting against psychological forces that have built up over time. You can't just decide to change. You need to deliberately and systematically build new momentum patterns through consistent small actions. The most successful people are momentum addicts. They become obsessed with maintaining their positive action chains because they understand the compound power of sustained momentum. They know that maintaining momentum is easier than creating momentum. So they protect their action chains like their most valuable possessions. When you have strong positive momentum, taking action stops feeling like work and starts feeling like maintenance. You don't have to convince yourself to exercise because you've built such strong exercise momentum that not exercising feels wrong. You don't have to force yourself to work on your goals because you've built such strong progress momentum that avoiding work feels uncomfortable. Chapter 8. Destroying Perfectionism, the Silent Dream Killer. Perfectionism isn't about having high standards. It's about having impossible standards that prevent you from ever starting. It's about being so terrified of producing anything less than perfect that you produce nothing at all. Perfectionism masquerades as excellence, but it's actually a sophisticated form of self-sabotage that keeps you safe from the vulnerability that comes with putting your work into the world. Here's what perfectionism really is. It's fear wearing the mask of quality. It's your brain's way of keeping you from risking failure, rejection, or judgment by ensuring you never put anything out there that could be criticized. Perfectionism tells you that if you can't do something perfectly, you shouldn't do it at all. It's the voice that says your first attempt must be your masterpiece. But here's the truth that destroys the perfectionist illusion. Perfection is impossible, and the pursuit of perfection guarantees mediocrity. While you're waiting to create something perfect, someone else is creating something good enough and improving it through iteration. While you're planning the perfect approach, someone else is taking imperfect action and learning through experience. The most successful people in any field are not perfectionists. They're iterationists. They understand that excellence comes from repetition, not from trying to achieve perfection on the first attempt. They know that the fastest path to quality is through quantity. They create, get feedback, improve, and repeat. This process naturally leads to excellence without the paralysis of perfectionism. Perfectionism is particularly destructive because it creates what psychologists call the perfectionism paradox. The more perfect you try to make something, the worse it often becomes. You spend so much time polishing minor details that you never develop the core skills. You focus so much on avoiding mistakes that you never take the risks necessary for breakthrough results. Think about the difference between someone learning to play piano who practices the same simple song perfectly for months versus someone who learns many songs imperfectly. The first person might play one song beautifully, but they haven't developed the range, adaptability, and overall skill that comes from tackling diverse challenges. The second person becomes a better musician because they've embraced imperfection as part of learning. This applies to everything in life. The entrepreneur who launches an imperfect product learns faster than the one who perfects their business plan for months without ever testing it. The writer who publishes imperfect articles learns faster than the one who endlessly edits their first piece without ever sharing it. The artist who creates many imperfect works develops faster than the one who labors over making their first piece perfect. Perfectionism also steals your ability to learn from failure. When you're focused on avoiding all mistakes, you avoid the experiences that teach you the most. Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's the foundation of success. Every failure contains information that can only be learned through failing. But perfectionists never access this information because they never allow themselves to fail. Here's what's particularly insidious about perfectionism. It feels virtuous. Society has conditioned us to believe that perfectionism is about having high standards and doing quality work. But true high standards are about consistently producing good work and improving over time. Perfectionism prevents both consistency and improvement by creating impossible barriers to action. The antidote to perfectionism is what I call progressive excellence. This means starting with a clear understanding that your first attempt will be imperfect. And that's exactly what you want. Your first attempt is not meant to be your best work. It's meant to be your starting point. Excellence is built through iteration, not through initial perfection. Progressive excellence requires you to set what I call minimum viable standards. Instead of asking how perfect can I make this, you ask what's the minimum level of quality that allows me to put this into the world and learn from it. This shifts your focus from perfection to progress, from avoiding mistakes to learning from mistakes. For a writer, this might mean publishing an article that communicates the main idea clearly, even if the style isn't perfect. For an entrepreneur, this might mean launching a product that solves the core problem, even if it doesn't have every feature they eventually want. For someone learning a skill, this might mean practicing in public before they feel completely competent. The magic of minimum viable standards is that they remove the perfectionist paralysis while still maintaining quality. You're not lowering your standards. You're making your standards actionable instead of paralyzing. You create a baseline that allows you to start while maintaining the intention to improve continuously. But defeating perfectionism requires more than just intellectual understanding. It requires emotional work. Because perfectionism is rooted in deep fears about not being good enough. Perfectionists often have an intense fear of being judged, criticized, or rejected. They believe that if they can just make their work perfect, they can avoid these uncomfortable experiences. This belief is based on a fundamental misunderstanding about how the world works. Perfect work doesn't exist, and even excellent work gets criticized. The only way to completely avoid criticism is to never put anything into the world, which guarantees that you'll never achieve anything meaningful. The goal isn't to avoid criticism. It's to become comfortable receiving feedback and using it to improve. To break free from perfectionism, you need to practice what I call intentional imperfection. This means deliberately creating and sharing work that you know could be better. Start with low-stakes situations where the consequences of imperfection are minimal. Write social media posts without editing them. Send emails without triple-checking them. Share ideas before you fully develop them. Each act of intentional imperfection weakens perfectionism's hold on you. You discover that sharing imperfect work doesn't destroy your reputation or prove that you're inadequate. Instead, it often leads to valuable feedback, unexpected opportunities, and faster learning than you would have achieved through endless perfectionism. The most liberating realization about perfectionism is that done is better than perfect. A finished project that's 80% of what you envisioned is infinitely more valuable than a perfect project that never gets completed. The finished project teaches you lessons, opens doors, and creates momentum for your next project. The perfect project that stays in your head teaches you nothing and creates nothing. When you embrace imperfection as part of excellence, everything changes. You start creating more, learning faster, and achieving better results. You stop being paralyzed by the gap between your current ability and your vision of perfect work. Instead, you see that gap as the space where growth happens, and you fill it through action, not analysis. Chapter 9. Creating artificial urgency to force immediate action. Most of the important things in your life have no natural deadlines. There's no external force making you work on your personal projects, start your business, get in shape, or develop new skills. This lack of urgency is exactly what kills your dreams. Without deadline pressure, your brain categorizes these important goals as non-urgent, which means they constantly get pushed aside for whatever feels urgent in the moment. This is why most people make more progress on work projects than personal projects. Even when their personal projects are more important for their long-term happiness and success, work projects have external deadlines, consequences, and accountability. Personal projects have none of these. So, they sink to the bottom of your priority list and stay there indefinitely. The solution isn't to wait for natural urgency to appear. The solution is to create artificial urgency that forces action. Successful people understand that urgency is a tool that can be manufactured, and they use this tool strategically to ensure their most important goals get the attention they deserve. Artificial urgency works because it hijacks the same psychological mechanisms that make you respond to natural deadlines. When you create real consequences for not acting, your brain treats your personal goals with the same seriousness it gives to work deadlines. The key word is real consequences. Your brain is excellent at detecting fake pressure and ignoring it. The most effective way to create artificial urgency is through what I call public accountability pressure. This means making your goals public in a way that creates social consequences for not following through. When other people know about your commitments, failing to act becomes failing in front of others, which your brain desperately wants to avoid. But not all accountability is created equal. Telling your friends that you're going to start exercising creates weak accountability because most friends will be supportive even if you don't follow through. They might ask about your progress once or twice, then stop mentioning it to avoid making you feel bad. This kind of soft accountability actually enables procrastination by removing consequences. Effective accountability requires what I call skin in the game. This means creating real stakes that matter to you. Put money on the line. Make public commitments to people who will hold you accountable. Join or create groups where your progress is tracked and visible. Sign up for events that require you to be prepared by a certain date. One of the most powerful urgency creation tools is the public challenge. Instead of setting private goals, create public challenges with specific timelines and measurable outcomes. Commit to posting daily updates about your progress. Share your results publicly at the end of the challenge period. The fear of public failure creates the same urgency as any external deadline. Money stakes are particularly effective because they make the cost of procrastination immediate and tangible. Put a significant amount of money somewhere that you'll lose it if you don't follow through. The amount needs to be large enough to hurt, but not so large that losing it would be devastating. For most people, this is somewhere between 1 week and 1 month of disposable income. But financial stakes only work if there's actually a mechanism to collect the money when you fail. Use apps or services that will automatically charge your credit card if you don't meet your commitments. Give money to a friend with instructions to donate it to a cause you hate if you don't follow through. The key is removing your ability to negotiate your way out of the consequences when the time comes. Another powerful urgency tool is what I call deadline stacking. Instead of giving yourself open-ended time to work on important projects, create multiple intermediate deadlines leading up to your final goal. Break your project into weekly or even daily milestones, each with its own mini deadline and consequences for missing it. Deadline stacking works because it prevents the procrastination that happens with distant deadlines. When you have 3 months to complete a project, the first 2 months feel infinite. But when you have 7 mini deadlines over those 3 months, each week feels urgent. You can't afford to procrastinate because missing this week's deadline immediately affects next week's progress. Social momentum can also create powerful artificial urgency. Find or create a group of people working towards similar goals and make your progress visible to them. When everyone else is making progress and sharing their results, staying stagnant becomes socially uncomfortable. The group's momentum creates urgency for your individual action. Competition is another urgency multiplier. Instead of working on your goals alone, find someone to compete with. Public competitions create instant urgency because they add the pressure of not wanting to lose. Even friendly competition activates psychological drives that make procrastination much harder. The key to effective urgency creation is making the consequences immediate rather than distant. Your brain discounts future consequences heavily, but it responds strongly to immediate consequences. If you're going to lose money, reputation, or face social embarrassment tomorrow for not acting today, you'll act today. If the consequences are weeks or months away, they won't drive immediate action. But perhaps the most sophisticated urgency tool is what I call opportunity cost pressure. This means constantly reminding yourself of what you're losing by not acting. Every day you don't work on your business is a day of potential income lost forever. Every day you don't work out is a day of health and energy you could have had. Every day you don't develop new skills is a day further behind you could be. Most people focus on the effort required to take action. But successful people focus on the cost of not taking action. They make procrastination more painful than action by constantly calculating what delay is costing them. They understand that the biggest risk isn't failure. It's the opportunity cost of never trying. Creating effective urgency requires you to be honest about your own psychology. What motivates you? What do you fear losing? What kind of accountability actually changes your behavior versus what you can easily ignore? Design your urgency systems around your real motivations, not the motivations you think you should have. The goal of artificial urgency isn't to stress yourself out constantly. It's to create focused periods of pressure that force action when action is needed most. Once you build momentum and establish positive habits, you need less external pressure because internal motivation takes over. But in the beginning, when you're fighting against procrastination patterns and building new neural pathways, artificial urgency is often the difference between success and endless delay. Chapter 10. Building an action-first identity that makes success automatic. Everything you do or don't do comes down to one thing. Identity. Who you believe yourself to be determines every choice you make. If you see yourself as someone who procrastinates, you'll find ways to delay action even when you consciously want to act immediately. If you see yourself as someone who executes, you'll find ways to take action even when you feel unmotivated or unprepared. Most people try to change their behavior without changing their identity. And this is why most behavior change fails. You can force yourself to act differently for a while. But if your identity doesn't support the new behavior, you'll eventually revert to patterns that align with who you believe yourself to be. Your identity is like gravity constantly pulling your actions back toward consistency with your self-concept. Here's the revolutionary insight that changes everything. Identity isn't fixed. It's not determined by your past or your genetics or your circumstances. Identity is simply a story you tell yourself about who you are. And like any story, it can be rewritten. But most people don't realize they're the author of their own identity story. So they remain stuck in limiting narratives about themselves. The people who achieve extraordinary results understand that identity change is the foundation of all other change. They don't just set goals. They decide who they need to become to achieve those goals. They don't just change their actions, they change their self-concept. They become the type of person who naturally does the things that create success. This process starts with understanding the difference between outcome-based identity and process-based identity. Most people have outcome-based identities. I am a successful entrepreneur. I am a fit person. I am a published author. The problem with outcome-based identity is that it depends on achieving specific results, which means your identity is fragile and dependent on external validation. Process-based identity is different. It's based on the type of actions you consistently take. I am someone who takes massive action. I am someone who shows up every day. I am someone who follows through on commitments. Process-based identity is much more powerful because it's under your complete control and creates the actions that lead to the outcomes you want. When you shift to a process-based identity focused on action, something magical happens. You stop needing motivation to act. Because acting becomes part of who you are. You don't need to convince yourself to work on your goals because working on your goals is what people like you do. The behavior becomes automatic because it aligns with your identity. But changing identity requires more than just deciding to see yourself differently. It requires what psychologists call identity evidence. Every time you act in a way that's consistent with your desired identity, you create evidence that supports that identity. Every time you act in a way that contradicts your desired identity, you create evidence against it. This is why small actions are so powerful for identity change. When you do one push-up, you create evidence that you're someone who exercises. When you write one paragraph, you create evidence that you're someone who writes. When you make one sales call, you create evidence that you're someone who takes business action. Each small action is a vote for the identity you want to build. The key insight is that identity change happens at the level of individual actions, not major transformations. You don't become an action taker by making one huge gesture. You become an action taker by consistently choosing action over inaction in small moments throughout your day. Each choice either reinforces your current identity or builds evidence for a new one. Most people underestimate how quickly identity can change when you're intentional about it. If you consistently act like the type of person who doesn't procrastinate, you'll start seeing yourself as someone who doesn't procrastinate within weeks. Your brain constantly updates its understanding of who you are based on recent evidence. And recent evidence carries more weight than distant past. This means your procrastination patterns from years ago don't determine who you are today unless you continue to reinforce them with current actions. The moment you start consistently choosing immediate action over delay, you begin building a new identity as someone who executes. Your past patterns become irrelevant compared to your current patterns. Building an action-first identity requires you to pay attention to your internal dialogue. Most people have identities built around limitation. I'm not a morning person. I'm not good with technology. I'm not a disciplined person. I'm not someone who follows through. These limiting beliefs become self-fulfilling prophecies because they guide your choices. Changing this internal dialogue starts with noticing when you use limiting identity statements about yourself. Every time you catch yourself saying, "I'm not the type of person who," or "I'm not good at," you have an opportunity to challenge that identity and choose a more empowering alternative. Instead of "I'm not disciplined," try "I'm learning to be more disciplined," or "I'm becoming someone who follows through." The language you use to describe yourself matters because it shapes how you see yourself, which shapes how you act. When you describe yourself as someone who is becoming more action-oriented, you create space for growth and change. When you describe yourself as someone who just isn't disciplined, you close off possibilities for improvement. One of the most powerful identity shifts is moving from "I have to" "I get to." Instead of "I have to work out," think "I get to work out because I'm someone who prioritizes health." Instead of "I have to work on my business," think "I get to work on my business because I'm someone who builds things." This subtle shift changes the emotional context of action from obligation to privilege. Another crucial identity shift is from perfection-based identity to progress-based identity. Instead of seeing yourself as someone who needs to do everything perfectly, see yourself as someone who values progress over perfection. This identity makes it easier to start imperfectly and improve through iteration. Rather than being paralyzed by perfectionism, the most successful people have what I call an implementation identity. They see themselves as people who turn ideas into reality, who bridge the gap between vision and execution, who make things happen rather than just thinking about making things happen. When you adopt an implementation identity, taking action becomes as natural as breathing because it's simply what people like you do. Building this identity requires celebrating implementation victories, not just outcome victories. When you take action on something you've been procrastinating on, acknowledge that victory regardless of the immediate results. When you start a project before you feel ready, recognize that as evidence of your action-first identity. When you choose doing over planning, celebrate that choice as identity reinforcement. Over time, as you accumulate evidence of being someone who acts immediately, takes on challenges, and follows through on commitments, this identity becomes stronger than any external motivation. You don't need to psyche yourself up to take action because action is just what you do. You don't need perfect conditions to start because starting imperfectly is part of who you are. The ultimate goal is to reach what I call identity momentum, where your self-concept creates such a strong pull toward action that procrastination becomes inconsistent with who you are. When you reach this point, taking immediate action stops feeling like a discipline you need to practice and starts feeling like the natural expression of who you've become. Chapter 11. Conquering Fear and Resistance, the Final Barriers to Action. Fear is the ultimate enemy of action. It's the voice that whispers, "What if you fail?" when you're about to start. It's the feeling that makes your chest tight when you think about putting yourself out there. It's the force that convinces you that staying small and safe is better than risking growth and uncertainty. But here's what most people don't understand. Fear isn't trying to protect you from real danger. It's trying to protect you from imaginary threats that exist only in your mind. Your brain evolved in an environment where most fears were about immediate physical survival. Being afraid of predators, heights, or unfamiliar foods could save your life. But in the modern world, most of your fears are social and psychological. You're afraid of being judged, rejected, criticized, or failing publicly. These fears feel real and urgent to your ancient brain, but they're not actually dangerous to your survival or well-being. The problem is that your brain treats these social fears with the same intensity as physical threats. When you think about giving a presentation, starting a business, or putting your creative work online, your brain triggers the same fight or flight response it would if you were being chased by a predator. Your heart races, your palms sweat, and every instinct tells you to run away or hide. This is why rational thinking doesn't cure fear. You can't logic your way out of an emotional response. That's designed to bypass logic entirely. You can tell yourself that the worst-case scenario isn't that bad. But your nervous system doesn't care about your rational analysis. It's responding to perceived threat. And it wants you to avoid that threat at all costs. But here's the breakthrough insight that changes everything about how you handle fear. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's action in the presence of fear. Brave people aren't fearless. They're afraid and they act anyway. They've learned that fear is information, not instruction. Fear tells you that something matters to you, not that you shouldn't do it. When you feel afraid of taking action on something important, that fear is actually confirming that you're moving in the right direction. Your brain only creates resistance around things that could change your life. It doesn't resist you staying comfortable because comfort keeps you safe. The presence of fear means you're about to do something that matters. Most people misinterpret fear as a stop sign when it's actually a green light. They think fear means they're not ready, when fear actually means they're exactly where they need to be. The goal isn't to eliminate fear before taking action. It's to take action while feeling afraid. This reframes fear from an obstacle into a compass pointing toward growth. The key to conquering fear is understanding the difference between useful fear and useless fear. Useful fear keeps you safe from real physical danger. If you're about to walk into traffic or touch a hot stove, fear serves you well, but useless fear tries to keep you safe from imaginary, social, and psychological dangers that aren't actually threatening your well-being. Most of your daily fears are useless fears disguised as useful ones. Your brain tells you that posting your content online is dangerous because people might criticize it. But criticism isn't actually dangerous. It's just uncomfortable. Your brain tells you that starting a business is risky because it might fail. But business failure isn't actually threatening your survival. It's just disappointing. Learning to distinguish between useful and useless fear requires you to ask one simple question. Is this fear protecting me from actual harm? Or is it protecting me from discomfort? If it's protecting you from discomfort, it's useless fear that you should push through. If it's protecting you from harm, it's useful fear that you should listen to. But even when you intellectually understand that your fear is useless, your body still feels the physical sensations of anxiety and resistance. This is where most people get stuck. They try to wait until the fear goes away before taking action. But useful action often makes fear stronger, not weaker. The more important something is to your future, the more fear you'll likely feel about it. The solution is learning to act with fear rather than without fear. This means developing what psychologists call distress tolerance, the ability to function effectively while experiencing uncomfortable emotions. You learn to feel afraid and move forward anyway. You learn to feel anxious and speak up anyway. You learn to feel uncertain and decide anyway. Developing distress tolerance starts with changing your relationship with uncomfortable sensations. Most people resist feeling afraid, which paradoxically makes the fear stronger and more persistent. When you resist an emotion, you feed it energy. When you accept an emotion without trying to change it, you rob it of its power over you. The next time you feel fear about taking action, try this. Instead of trying to talk yourself out of being afraid, simply acknowledge the fear and take action anyway. Say to yourself, I notice I'm feeling afraid and I'm going to do this anyway. This doesn't eliminate the fear, but it prevents the fear from controlling your behavior. Another powerful technique is what I call fear surfing. Instead of trying to avoid the waves of anxiety and resistance, you learn to ride them. You recognize that fear comes in waves. It peaks and then subsides. If you can stay with the discomfort instead of running from it, the intensity naturally decreases. Most people abort their efforts right at the peak of the fear wave just before it would have subsided naturally. Fear also loses its power when you expose yourself to it repeatedly. This is the principle behind exposure therapy, one of the most effective treatments for anxiety disorders. Every time you feel afraid and take action anyway, you teach your brain that the fear was unfounded. Over time, your brain updates its threat assessment and reduces the intensity of fear around similar situations. But perhaps the most important insight about fear is that it's often a sign that you're on the verge of a breakthrough. The biggest fears usually guard the biggest opportunities. If starting your own business terrifies you, that might be because business ownership could transform your entire life. If putting your creative work online scares you, that might be because creative success could change everything about your identity and future. The people who achieve extraordinary results have learned to interpret fear as excitement. They understand that the physiological sensations are identical. The only difference is the story they tell themselves about what those sensations mean. Fear and excitement are both high-energy emotions that prepare your body for action. The choice of interpretation is yours. When you start seeing fear as a signal that you're moving towards something important rather than away from something dangerous, everything changes. You stop avoiding fear and start seeking it out. You stop looking for comfortable actions and start looking for scary actions, because scary actions are where the growth happens. You realize that the life you want is on the other side of the things you're afraid to do. Chapter 12. Designing your environment for automatic success. Your environment is stronger than your willpower. No matter how motivated you feel or how many promises you make to yourself, your surroundings will ultimately shape your behavior. This is why some people seem to effortlessly maintain positive habits while others constantly struggle against their own impulses. The difference isn't in their character or discipline. It's in how well they've designed their environment to support their goals. Most people try to change their behavior without changing their environment. And this is why most behavior change fails. They rely on willpower to overcome environmental obstacles instead of removing the obstacles entirely. But willpower is a finite resource that gets depleted throughout the day. Your environment, on the other hand, influences your behavior 24 hours a day without requiring any conscious effort from you. Think about the difference between trying to eat healthy in a house full of junk food versus trying to eat healthy in a house full of fresh fruits and vegetables. In the first scenario, every time you're hungry, you have to use willpower to resist the convenient unhealthy options. In the second scenario, the healthy choice is the easy choice. The environment does the work for you. This principle applies to every area of your life. If you want to exercise regularly, but your workout clothes are buried in your closet and your gym is 30 minutes away, you're fighting against your environment. If you want to write consistently, but your workspace is cluttered and your phone is within arm's reach, you're sabotaging yourself through poor environmental design. The key to environmental design is understanding the difference between friction and flow. Friction is anything that makes desired actions harder to do. Flow is anything that makes desired actions easier to do. Successful people systematically remove friction from positive behaviors while adding friction to negative behaviors. If you want to read more books, remove friction by placing books everywhere in your home and adding friction by putting your TV remote in another room. If you want to work out more, remove friction by sleeping in your workout clothes and adding friction by canceling your Netflix subscription. Every element of your environment should be designed to push you toward your goals rather than away from them. But environmental design goes deeper than just physical objects. Your social environment is equally powerful in shaping your behavior. The people you spend time with, the conversations you have, and the expectations others have of you all create environmental pressure that influences your choices. If you're surrounded by people who procrastinate and make excuses, you'll find it much harder to maintain an action-oriented mindset. This is why successful people are extremely selective about their social environment. They seek out relationships with people who challenge them to grow, support their goals, and model the behaviors they want to develop. They distance themselves from people who drain their energy, encourage negative habits, or normalize mediocrity. Your information environment is also crucial. What you read, watch, and listen to programs your subconscious mind and influences your default thought patterns. If you consume content that reinforces limiting beliefs, victimhood mentality, or negative thinking, your environment is working against your success. If you consume content that reinforces growth mindset, personal responsibility and positive action. Your environment supports your goals. Most people consume information passively without considering how it shapes their psychology. They scroll social media mindlessly, watch whatever appears on their screen, and listen to whatever plays automatically. But successful people curate their information environment as carefully as they curate their physical space. They choose content that inspires action, provides useful knowledge, and reinforces empowering beliefs. Environmental design also includes your digital environment. Your phone, computer, and online accounts should be optimized to support your goals rather than distract you from them. This means removing apps that waste your time, organizing your digital workspace for productivity, and setting up systems that remind you of your priorities throughout the day. Your physical workspace has an enormous impact on your ability to focus and take action. A cluttered, disorganized space creates mental clutter and makes deep work nearly impossible. A clean, organized space with everything you need within reach makes focused work feel natural and effortless. The state of your environment reflects and influences the state of your mind. But environmental design isn't just about removing distractions. It's about adding positive triggers that prompt desired behaviors. These are called environmental cues, and they work by automating the decision-making process. Instead of having to remember and decide to take positive actions, your environment reminds you and makes the actions obvious. For example, if you want to take vitamins daily, put them next to your coffee maker so you see them every morning. If you want to practice guitar, leave your guitar out in your living room instead of in its case. If you want to drink more water, keep a full water bottle on your desk at all times. The environment cue eliminates the need to remember and makes the action more convenient. One of the most powerful environmental design principles is what I call context switching. This means creating specific environments for specific activities. Your bedroom should be only for sleep. Your office should be only for work. Your gym should be only for exercise. When you blur the boundaries between contexts, you weaken the environmental triggers that support each behavior. Context switching works because your brain forms associations between environments and behaviors. When you always work in the same place, your brain automatically shifts into work mode. When you enter that space, when you mix activities in the same environment, these associations become confused and less effective. The ultimate goal of environmental design is to make good decisions inevitable and bad decisions impossible. You want to create what psychologists call a choice architecture that guides you towards success without requiring conscious willpower. When your environment is properly designed, maintaining positive habits feels effortless because you're swimming with the current instead of against it. But remember that environmental design is an ongoing process, not a one-time setup. As your goals change and you identify new obstacles to success, you need to continuously adjust your environment to stay aligned with your priorities. The most successful people regularly audit their environment and make improvements to ensure it continues supporting their growth. Your environment is either working for you or against you. There's no neutral ground. Every object in your space, every person in your social circle, every piece of content you consume is either pushing you toward your goals or pulling you away from them. When you take control of your environment, you take control of your future. Chapter 13. Turning setbacks into comebacks. The art of unstoppable recovery. Setbacks are inevitable, but giving up is optional. Every person who has achieved anything meaningful has faced moments when everything seemed to fall apart. The difference between those who succeed and those who quit isn't the absence of failure. It's the ability to bounce back from failure faster and stronger than before. Mastering the art of recovery is what separates temporary success from permanent success. Most people have a completely wrong relationship with setbacks. They see failure as evidence that they're not cut out for success, that their goals are unrealistic, or that they should give up and try something safer. But this interpretation of failure is not just wrong. It's dangerous. It turns temporary setbacks into permanent defeats and transforms learning experiences into reasons to quit. Here's the truth that will transform how you handle adversity. Setbacks are not roadblocks, they're redirects. They're not stop signs. They're course corrections. Every failure contains valuable information that can only be learned through failing. Every setback reveals weaknesses in your approach that you can strengthen. Every mistake teaches you something that no amount of planning or preparation could have taught you. The most successful people have a completely different relationship with failure than average people. They don't see failure as the opposite of success. They see it as part of success. They understand that failure is not something that happens to you on the way to success. It's something that happens as part of success. You don't fail and then succeed. You fail your way to success. This mindset shift changes everything about how you respond to setbacks. Instead of asking why did this happen to me, you ask what can I learn from this? Instead of thinking I'm not good enough, you think I'm not good enough yet. Instead of concluding this doesn't work, you conclude this approach doesn't work. The key to turning setbacks into comebacks is developing what psychologists call a growth mindset. This means believing that your abilities, intelligence, and skills can be developed through effort and learning. When you have a growth mindset, setbacks become opportunities to improve rather than proof that you can't improve. But mindset alone isn't enough. You also need a systematic process for extracting value from every setback. This process starts with what I call failure analysis. Instead of just moving on from setbacks, you need to study them like a scientist studies data. What exactly went wrong? What were the contributing factors? What could have been done differently? Most people avoid thinking about their failures because it's uncomfortable. They want to forget about setbacks as quickly as possible and move on to something else. But this approach wastes the most valuable learning opportunity they'll ever have. Failure is expensive, but it becomes even more expensive when you don't learn from it. Effective failure analysis requires emotional distance from the setback. Immediately after a failure, you're usually too emotional to think clearly about what happened. You need to wait until the initial sting has worn off before you can objectively analyze the situation. This might take hours, days, or even weeks depending on the magnitude of the setback. Once you can think clearly about what happened, you need to separate the factors you could control from the factors you couldn't control. Every setback involves both controllable and uncontrollable elements. Focusing on the uncontrollable factors leads to victimhood and helplessness. Focusing on the controllable factors leads to learning and improvement. For the controllable factors, you need to develop what I call failure protocols. These are specific plans for how you'll handle similar situations in the future. If you failed because you didn't prepare enough, your protocol might be to always start preparing 2 weeks earlier than you think necessary. If you failed because you ignored warning signs, your protocol might be to create a checklist of red flags to watch for. Failure protocols prevent you from making the same mistakes repeatedly. Most people fail, learn a lesson, then forget that lesson and make the same mistake again months later. Protocols ensure that every failure makes you permanently better at handling similar challenges in the future. Another crucial element of setback recovery is what I call rapid re-engagement. This means getting back into action as quickly as possible after a setback. The longer you wait between failing and trying again, the more your confidence erodes and the harder it becomes to restart. Momentum works in both directions, and recovery momentum is just as powerful as success momentum. Rapid re-engagement doesn't mean jumping back into exactly the same approach that failed. It means taking some kind of positive action related to your goals, even if it's small and different from what you were doing before. The goal is to prove to yourself that you're still someone who takes action despite setbacks. Many people make the mistake of trying to bounce back at the exact same level they were at before the setback. If they were working out 5 days a week before they got injured, they try to immediately restart at 5 days a week. If they were writing 2,000 words a day before they hit writer's block, they try to immediately restart at 2,000 words. This approach often leads to another setback because they're not accounting for the lost momentum and confidence. A better approach is what I call progressive recovery. This means starting at a lower level than where you were before and gradually building back up. If you were working out 5 days a week, restart with 2 days a week and gradually increase. If you were writing 2,000 words a day, restart with 500 words and gradually build up. This approach rebuilds momentum more sustainably and reduces the risk of another immediate setback. The most successful people also practice what I call anti-fragility. This is the ability to become stronger from stresses rather than just surviving them. Anti-fragile people don't just bounce back from setbacks. They use setbacks as fuel for greater success. They emerge from challenges more resilient, more skilled, and more determined than they were before. Developing anti-fragility requires you to actively look for the hidden benefits in every setback. What skills did this challenge force you to develop? What weaknesses did it reveal that you can now strengthen? What opportunities did it create that didn't exist before? What connections did you make? While overcoming this obstacle, every setback also tests and strengthens your commitment to your goals. When things are going well, it's easy to stay motivated. But when you face serious obstacles and choose to continue anyway, you prove to yourself that your goals really matter to you. This deepens your commitment and makes you more resilient to future challenges. The ultimate goal is to become someone who is excited by setbacks rather than discouraged by them. When you truly understand that every failure is making you better, stronger, and more capable, setbacks become opportunities for growth rather than reasons to quit. You start to see obstacles as training rather than barriers. Remember that the most successful people in any field have usually failed more times than average people have even tried. The difference is that they've developed the skill of turning every failure into fuel for future success. They've learned that setbacks are not the end of the story. They're plot twists that make the eventual victory even more meaningful. Chapter 14. Scaling your actions from personal progress to massive impact. Taking action consistently is just the beginning. Once you've mastered the art of immediate action and built unstoppable momentum in your personal life, the next level is learning how to scale your actions to create massive impact. This means moving beyond just improving your own situation to building systems, leading others, and creating value that extends far beyond yourself. Most people get comfortable once they've solved their immediate problems and built some positive momentum. They develop good habits, achieve some personal goals, and then plateau. But the people who create extraordinary results understand that personal progress is just the foundation for something much bigger. They use their individual momentum as a launching pad for exponential impact. The transition from personal action to scaled action requires a fundamental shift in thinking. Instead of asking how can I do more, you start asking how can I multiply my impact. Instead of focusing on working harder, you focus on working more strategically. Instead of trying to do everything yourself, you start building systems and teams that can operate without your constant involvement. This shift starts with understanding the difference between linear growth and exponential growth. Linear growth happens when you simply do more of what you're already doing. If you can write 1 article a day, you write 2 articles a day. If you can make 10 sales calls a day, you make 20 sales calls a day. Linear growth is predictable but limited by your personal capacity. Exponential growth happens when you create systems that multiply your efforts. Instead of writing more articles yourself, you build a team of writers. Instead of making more sales calls yourself, you develop a sales system that generates leads automatically. Instead of trading time for money, you create assets that generate value while you sleep. The key to exponential growth is understanding leverage. Leverage means getting more output for less input. There are 4 main types of leverage that you can use to scale your actions: financial leverage, people leverage, technology leverage, and knowledge leverage. Financial leverage means using money to multiply your impact. Instead of doing everything yourself, you invest in tools, systems, and people that can do things faster and better than you can. This might mean hiring employees, outsourcing tasks, or investing in equipment that increases your productivity. People leverage means building teams and systems that allow other people to extend your impact. This could involve hiring employees, partnering with others, or creating systems that enable volunteers or customers to contribute to your goals. The key is designing systems that align other people's interests with your objectives. Technology leverage means using software, automation, and digital tools to multiply your capabilities. Instead of manually performing repetitive tasks, you create systems that handle them automatically. Instead of limiting yourself to local impact, you use technology to reach global audiences. Knowledge leverage means codifying what you've learned into systems, processes, and content that others can use. This might involve writing books, creating courses, developing methodologies, or building software that embeds your knowledge. Knowledge leverage allows you to impact people you'll never meet personally. But scaling your actions isn't just about leverage. It's also about developing what I call systems thinking. This means looking at your goals not as isolated outcomes but as parts of larger systems that can be designed, optimized, and scaled. Instead of focusing on individual tasks, you focus on the processes that generate those tasks. Systems thinking requires you to identify the key constraints that limit your current impact. In any system, there's usually one bottleneck that determines the output of the entire system. Finding and addressing these constraints can create dramatic improvements in results with minimal additional effort. For example, if you're trying to grow a business, the constraint might be lead generation, sales conversion, product development, or customer retention. Identifying the real constraint and focusing your efforts there will create much better results than randomly trying to improve everything at once. Another crucial element of scaling is developing leadership multiplier skills. As your impact grows, you'll need to work with and through other people to achieve your goals. This means learning how to communicate vision, delegate effectively, motivate teams, and create systems that enable others to perform at their best. Leadership in this context isn't about managing people. It's about creating environments where people can contribute their best work towards shared objectives. It's about designing incentive systems that align individual motivation with collective goals. It's about building cultures that attract talented people and keep them engaged. Scaling also requires what I call strategic patience. While individual actions should be immediate, scaled impact often takes time to develop. Building systems, teams, and leverage requires upfront investment of time and resources before you see exponential returns. Many people give up during this investment phase because the results aren't immediately visible. But perhaps the most important aspect of scaling is maintaining what got you to this point in the first place. As your impact grows and your systems become more complex, it's easy to lose touch with the immediate action principles that created your initial success. You can become so focused on strategy and systems that you stop taking direct action yourself. The most successful scaled leaders maintain what I call frontline connection. They continue to engage directly with the core activities of their mission even as they build systems around them. They don't just manage the business. They stay connected to customers. They don't just oversee the team. They continue doing the work alongside their team members. This connection serves multiple purposes. It keeps you grounded in the reality of your mission rather than getting lost in abstraction. It maintains your credibility with team members who need to see that you're still committed to the work. And it ensures that you continue learning and improving rather than becoming disconnected from the actual results you're trying to create. Scaling your actions also means thinking beyond just financial or business metrics. True scaled impact includes considering the broader effect of your actions on other people, communities, and even society. The most fulfilling scaled success comes from creating value that extends far beyond your personal benefit. This might mean building businesses that provide meaningful employment for others. It might mean creating content or products that genuinely help people improve their lives. It might mean using your platform and resources to support causes that matter to you. The key is aligning your scaled actions with values and purposes that give your life deeper meaning. The ultimate goal of scaling your actions is creating what I call legacy momentum. This means building things that will continue creating positive impact long after you're no longer directly involved. It means creating systems, teaching principles, and developing people in ways that ensure your positive impact continues to multiply even without your ongoing involvement. Chapter 15. The choice that changes everything. Your decision point. Right now, you've reached the end. But this isn't really an ending. It's a beginning. Everything you've learned means nothing unless you make one crucial decision right now. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Not when you feel more prepared. Right now, the decision is simple but not easy. Are you going to be someone who acts immediately or someone who delays action indefinitely? This choice will determine everything about your future. It will determine whether you look back on this moment as the turning point when everything changed or as just another piece of information that you consumed but never applied. It will determine whether you become someone who creates extraordinary results or someone who knows what it takes to create extraordinary results but never does it. Here's what I need you to understand with complete clarity. Everything you want in life is waiting for you on the other side of immediate action. The business you want to start, the body you want to have, the skills you want to develop, the relationships you want to build, the impact you want to create. It's all there, but it's only accessible through action, not through thinking, planning, or waiting for perfect conditions. Most people will listen to everything I've shared and then do exactly what they've always done. They'll feel motivated for a few hours or maybe a few days. They'll make plans and set goals and promise themselves that this time will be different. But then they'll fall back into the same patterns of delay, distraction, and procrastination that have kept them stuck for years. They'll tell themselves they need to think about it more. They'll convince themselves they should start tomorrow or next Monday or after they finish this other project. They'll find reasons why their situation is different, why the principles don't apply to them, why they need to modify the approach before they begin. And while they're doing all of this mental gymnastics, others who heard the same information will be taking action and getting results. The difference between these two groups isn't intelligence, talent, resources, or circumstances. The difference is the willingness to act immediately despite feeling unprepared. The people who succeed make the decision to act now and figure it out as they go. The people who stay stuck make the decision to figure it out first and act later. But here's the truth that most people never realize. You will never feel completely ready. You will never have all the information you think you need. You will never have perfect clarity about the outcome. The feeling of readiness that you're waiting for doesn't come before action. It comes from action. You become ready by doing, not by preparing to do. Every moment you spend thinking about whether you should take action is a moment you could have spent actually taking action. Every day you delay starting is a day of progress lost forever. Every week you wait for better conditions is a week that someone else is using to build the lead that will become impossible to overcome. The cost of inaction isn't just the time you lose. It's the momentum you forfeit, the confidence you sacrifice, and the identity you reinforce. Every time you choose delay over action, you strengthen the neural pathways that make future procrastination more likely. Every time you choose action over delay, you strengthen the neural pathways that make future action more natural. This means that what you choose to do in the next 5 minutes will influence what you're likely to do in the next 5 hours. What you do in the next 5 hours will influence what you do in the next 5 days. What you do in the next 5 days will set the trajectory for your next 5 months. And what you do in the next 5 months will determine where you are 5 years from now. The choice you make right now ripples forward through time and shapes everything that comes after. This isn't dramatic exaggeration. It's the compound mathematics of human behavior. Small actions repeated consistently create massive results over time. Small delays repeated consistently create massive regret over time. So, what is the one action you've been avoiding? What is the conversation you need to have? the project you need to start, the habit you need to begin, the decision you need to make. What is the thing that you know would change your life if you actually did it? But you've been finding excuses to delay it. Whatever that thing is, that's what you need to do first. Not the easier thing, not the more comfortable thing, not the thing you feel prepared for, the thing you've been avoiding, the thing that scares you, the thing that feels too big or too uncertain or too likely to expose your inadequacy. Because here's what you'll discover when you finally take that action. It's never as hard as you imagined it would be. Your brain always overestimates the difficulty and underestimates your capability. The fear you feel before taking action is almost always disproportionate to the actual challenge you face. The monster in your head is always bigger than the monster in reality. But you can't learn this by thinking about it. You can only learn it by doing it. You can't build confidence by visualizing success. You build it by taking action and succeeding. You can't overcome fear by avoiding what scares you. You overcome it by doing what scares you, and discovering that you're more capable than you thought. The people who live extraordinary lives are not fundamentally different from you. They don't have secret knowledge, special genetics, or magical circumstances. They have one thing that you can develop starting right now: the habit of immediate action. They've trained themselves to move from decision to action so quickly that their brain doesn't have time to create resistance. You can become this type of person. You can develop this habit. You can rewire your brain to default to action instead of delay. But it starts with one choice made right now to do something immediately instead of putting it off. I don't care if the action is small. I don't care if it's imperfect. I don't care if you don't feel ready. What matters is the speed between thinking and doing. What matters is proving to yourself that you're someone who acts when they say they will. What matters is starting the momentum that will carry you toward everything you want. The choice is yours. You can close this content and go back to your old patterns of planning without acting, thinking without doing, dreaming without building. Or you can decide right now that your life of delay ends today, and your life of action begins immediately. What will it be? Will you be someone who heard powerful information and did nothing with it? Or will you be someone who heard powerful information and immediately put it into action? Will you be someone who knows what success requires but never pursues it? Or will you be someone who knows what success requires and relentlessly executes it? The next 5 minutes will reveal your answer. Not your words, but your actions. Not your intentions, but your choices. Not your plans, but your behavior. Your extraordinary life is waiting. The only question is whether you'll take the first step toward it right now or whether you'll keep it waiting indefinitely while you prepare to be ready for something you could start today. The power of now isn't just a concept. It's not just a strategy. It's not just information. It's a choice. And that choice is available to you right now. What are you going to choose?